for sake of equity, fairness, and what have you. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the APC is able to manage it. But I'm not sure it's going to be easy for them to just take a decision and allow it to stand. So I just advise that they have to be conscious in managing this issue.
All right, but that is as regards the upper chamber, the Senate. Now we're looking at the House of Representatives, as there's a fresh twist that's been added as 4 main contenders commenced alliance talks ahead of the June 13 inauguration. So we have Ahmed Idris Wassem, who is currently the Deputy Speaker. We have Aliu Mukhtar Betara, who is the Chairman House Committee on Appropriation. We have Sada Soli and Sani Jaji. And they met at a private residence. They agreed to work together and present a common front. All right. But then you have a situation where, there's a supposed Lagos cabal that's been headed by current Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila.
Moving towards Tajudeen Abbas from Zaria.
Oh, yes, Kaduna State, exactly.
Kaduna State, yes, Zaria, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So you have this, it was even as a crack emerged in the Lagos caucus over the purported adoption of this same Abbas. But then a close confidant, now I'm reading from The Guardian, of Tinubu and Secretary of the now dissolved Presidential Campaign Council, that James Faleke, was said to have confronted Gbajabiamila and accused him of misinformation. Now, with all of that happening, all of the shenanigans happening at the Senate, the House of Reps has its own problems as well. Especially,
it's even more intriguing.
It's even more intriguing
because of their numbers. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, almost 800 or how many people now over there. But then this particular story is giving us that there may be a 287 member alliance against Abbas, who is favored by the current speaker, who unfortunately can't return as speaker. So how do you think the pendulum would swing as regards Tajudeen Abbas?
I just mentioned that the leadership of this have to be very, very careful. I see a situation where the current speaker is meddling too much. He will becomes what at the House of Reps. And he needs to understand that, look, he was just a speaker. There are ranking honorables, House of Reps members in that house who will be ready to slug it out with the party if they are not careful. One of them is Aliu Dogoa from Kano State. And if you look at what you have just read now, these House of Reps members are also committee chairmen and ranking honorables in their own right, who have the experience, the followership, and also support within the House chambers. And remember, the opposition is on the waiting. They are waiting on the line to pitch their tent. And I'm putting my eye more on what the PDP will decide to do going forward as far as the House is concerned. Because see, the reality of politics is that, look, the opposition will sit back now. The PDP, the Labour Party, all other parties will sit back and say, hey, the decision of the leadership of the APC, how does it affect us? How does it protect our interests? And like I said, what disgruntled members of the APC will do is to work with the opposition. And with the numbers of the opposition now, they have the capacity of state the APC.
Thank you very much, Fuhad, because the same report says this division among the speakership aspirants of the APC has now excited the 181 members of the opposition caucus in the House, just as you have correctly analyzed. So whether or not the opposition will take advantage of that split or the division, we'll see as time goes on. But more details on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. Thank you very much for that. Moving on now, we also have Sudan crisis. We slept on the floor as bullets killed people on the bed. So still testimonials from evacuees of the Sudan crisis. So what we have is that update. The Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM, has disclosed that 1,471 evacuees from Sudan had arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. All right, so they've been coming in different batches, and this is just an update as regards the latest batch that has come in, with different evacuees giving testimonials of their experience in Sudan. More details on page 3 of the Guardian. We also have here Oshun Public education infrastructure in dire straits. That's on page 4. So, very quickly, we have a report here as regards, the following years of neglect and huge appropriation votes to education. Public schools in Osun State are imploding, and there are reports that the children, as it is, are in collapsed roofs, cracks on walls, fallen windows, lack of clean toilets. Basic amenities that are conducive to learning have become hallmarks of some public schools in Osun State. It's a news analysis of the Guardian newspaper, but then relating it to the conversation we had on Friday, Fuhad, as regards, unqualified private school teachers. Do you see this as a contribution to why there's a rise in, unbaked teachers in the private school sector?
No, of course. Right. I think what we discussed last week, Friday, basically was that, look, the reason why we have so many, substandard private schools with unqualified teachers, from the report of Friday, it was said that 70% of the teachers in most of these private schools are not qualified. Basically, is the fact that, look, our public schools have become a no-no. We'll just go and check. This is just about Osun, but it's not an Osun State matter. It's a Nigerian problem. The government at all levels have abandoned our public schools. But if you talk about public schools, don't even mention public primary schools. Go and see what happens in those public primary schools. The teachers are not even interested. I'm not saying the teachers in those public schools are not qualified, but what's the commitment to even teaching the children? What are the facilities available? In most of these things, go and check if students are still sitting on the floor in most of the public schools. So the level of education at that level has dropped to the point where parents can't even, it's not even an option for parents to even send their children to public schools again. You have to be the lowest of the lowest to even think about it. So people just look at any option. So far it's a private school, they don't even want to know the quality of teachers available, the quality of the school, whether it's standard or not. So far it's a school, you just want to send their children there because the public schools have become a problem. There's nothing available in them again. And we said it again on Friday. The way the government and associates of government have killed public primary schools, they've done that also to secondary schools. The only secondary school that you can talk about now that belongs to government are probably the Unity School, and they don't come cheap. But the new public secondary schools, go on.
Hello? All right, we'll definitely try to reconnect with Fuhad, but that is more details. You can get more details of the dire situation that the public education and infrastructure is having in Osun State in particular. All right, and we also have here flight disruption in Abuja as Max Air loses landing wheel. So it's a particular runway in Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport has been shut off. The story is on page 2 of The Guardian. And finally, we have diesel tanker accident worsens gridlock on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. The story is on page 8 of The Guardian newspaper. And it says here that it was another day of lamentation by commuters and motorists as a diesel-laden tanker yesterday fell and spilled its content around Ibafo bus stop, thereby worsening traffic along Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. And it was coming to Lagos when the accident happened. So inbound Lagos, I don't know if that has been resolved, but that is the situation of things on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, most especially at the Ibafo access. All right, that's all we have from the Guardian newspaper. You're listening to Trends in the Papers on 98.3 Mainland FM. Don't forget that we are live on Facebook and YouTube at Mainland FM 98.3. So you can watch the program live and as well drop your comments, in the comment section. Thank you. All right, let's keep moving now. I have Fuhad Saheed still with me via the phone line, giving analysis to the trending stories we have this morning. All right, so Fuhad, now we're moving on to the Nation newspaper and the major headline, Senate House, APC NWC to ratify zoning plan today. The rider says APC Northwest Chairman OK Akpabio and Barau. Yari won't support consensus candidate. Southeast Senators-elect reject zoning to south. All right, Fuhad, I think you remember quite clearly the listeners or the callers that we had yesterday and their thoughts and intentions and purposes towards Ojus or Kalu, one of the southeast aspirants for the Senate presidency, and then that's left with I've forgotten his. I don't know why I keep forgetting his name. Izunaso, yes, Izunaso of Imo State.
Or Devumahi.
Or Devumahi. All right.
Devumahi has endorsed Fabio, so
we have moved on to Izunaso now from the southeast. But they are still, but now they are rejecting the zoning to south. So who do they have? Who else do they have?
No. The callers we have.
No. I'm talking about the nation now. Is report one of the riders here says Southeast senators elect reject zoning to south.
No, they are still working with Ojus Okalu because at the meeting yesterday, where that declaration was made, Ojus Okalu was seated. The Senator Ojus Okalu was there, and other senators from the southeast. But of course, David Umahi was not there because he had actually peaced in church. With Godswill Fabio. But again, that's why I'm saying that the APC leadership has to be careful. The reality again is that look, all Jews or Kalu for whatever anybody says, it's not a pushover. He was a two-term governor. He's a ranking senator. You understand? He's a ranking senator. He's a politician who also knows his onions. So he's somebody who also understands the game. And for Southeasterners who are saying they don't want him, well, I'm sure there are Southeasterners who also want him. It's a democracy. I'm sure they are entitled to their opinion. But I also believe that there are quite a number of Southeasterners who would not mind him as Senate president.
Well, all right. As it is now, the ruling party's National Working Committee has slated a meeting to decide the geopolitical zones where top positions, Senate President, Deputy Senate President, House Speaker, Deputy Speaker, will come from. Let us not forget that the APC has 59 senators elect out of 109, and they also have 178 representatives elect out of 360. So, of course, de facto becoming the party with the single largest members. But then different leaders have made their recommendations. So we'll see how the pendulum will swing today at the end of their meeting today. More details on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. We also have here on the front page of the Nation, IMF urges Nigeria and others to take over Russia's oil market in Europe. So the International Monetary Fund, IMF, has advised Nigeria and other commodities producing countries in the sub-Saharan Africa to seize Russia's energy market in Europe. Geopolitical tensions persist as the Russia-Ukraine war continues. I think we've always had this conversation, Fuhad. Do you think Nigeria can make it to become a top oil producer? I mean, we're the second largest, was supposedly the second largest. Yes, in sub-Saharan Africa. But do you think Nigeria will rise to that occasion, to rise to that position that it currently occupies?
We have the potentials. But it's not going to happen by mere saying it. The reality is that if we are still battling with oil theft, if we are still not able to have functional refineries, if we are still having a lot of corruption in our oil sector, we may not be able to get to that position, even though we have all the potentials. We are the largest oil exporting country in sub-Saharan Africa, Angola being second. The reality is that there are things that we need to deal with, and we have to be intentional about those things. So until we resolve all of those issues, sabotage in the oil sector, oil theft, the fact that we can't even refine our own products and all of those kinds of things. So until we resolve all of that, up till now we have still not been able to meet our OPEC quota. We struggle with our quota every quarter, and that's not going to let the OPEC even increase our quota if we're not able to really meet up with what is given to us. So the reality is that we have the potential to do more. We have the potential to take advantage of the crisis that the Ukraine war has brought. But we are not doing any of that because of our own internal issues that we have not been able to resolve.
Well, whether or not to will be taking any form of advantage of whatever is happening between Russia and Ukraine, because as it is now, Russia is under economic sanctions. So we'll see, just as you have correctly analyzed. More details on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. Also, we have here on the front page of the Nation, Diezani seeks vacation of bench warrant. And that story is on page 6. Just very quickly, what we have is that the former Minister of Petroleum Resources, Mrs. Diezani Alison Madueke, has prayed a federal high court in Abuja to set aside the bench warrant issued against her in 2020. And she's seeking a court order extending the time within she could seek leave to apply for the order discharging the bench warrant. There's a lot of technical terms here, but I'll just leave that forward. Diezani is seeking an extension of the time within which she could leave, but more importantly, she's seeking to set aside the bench warrant issued against her in 2020. And she's also urging the court to strike out her name as a defendant in charge between the federal government versus Diezani, pending before this honorable court. Just as I mentioned, a lot of technical terms.
Well, you see, the issue with the Diezani case is I don't know whether the Nigerian government have been able to manage the issue properly. Because, again, there have been a lot of legal loopholes that I think have been explored and exploited by her. Because basically all she did at the assumption of office of President Muhammadu Buhari was to just leave the country. But I've been wondering why the government has not been filing for an extradition of Diezani to the country. If indeed, because again, we have an extradition treaty with the United Kingdom. So if the government really think they have a case against her, I would have thought that all they needed to do physically was to file an extradition request for her to be brought back to the country to stand trial. Again, all of this applying to one court, going to another court, stop all of these kinds of things are legal loopholes that our politicians are used to taking advantage of. But I also feel that the government has not been able to manage our issue very well. I think it's been more of media trial than really looking at legal ways of dealing with our issues. Because as it is, none of our issues have been resolved by the government fully. So I think that in the management of this case, because there are serious allegations against her, but I don't think the government has been able to manage that issue very well. She's within her right to look at legal means of getting out of the current debacle she has found herself in. But I also think the government could have done better, or there are ways they could have done better that I think are the faltered with. But again, it's all legal things, and she's within her right to do whatever she's doing.
Yeah. Well, more details on page 6 of the Nation. Also have this interesting story here. Ex-ambassador sues bank over missing 1 billion naira jewelries. So, former Nigerian ambassador to Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau, Justina Eze, has sued a bank for the disappearance of her jewelries from the bank's vault. And she's demanding that the bank accounts for the jewelries she deposited in its vault about 24 years ago and paying service charges. So she has been paying service charges, and now she said that after her appointment in 1999 by former President Olusegun Obasanjo, she purchased a safe deposit box for a generous collection of gold, diamond, coral beads, and other materials. Gave one of her daughters, Dr. Chinwe Eze, to take to the bank's branch in Enugu. Every month, the bank deducted an agreed sum from her account as service charge, and now they cannot find the jewelry box. That's worth over 1 billion naira. So what 1 billion? Yes, the jewelries are worth over 1 billion naira. So what have they been charging her for?
For an empty vault?
I don't know.
Again, I'm sure the bank would have to sit and find a way to resolve this, because I'm sure there are processes to these things. And I would also expect that a vault where valuable jewelries like that are kept would be well guarded. I'm sure there will be CCTVs. I'm sure there will be a lot of things.
Password, passcode.
So how do you think got missing is left for the bank to sort out? Of course, now that she has taken them to court, I think the bank will really do the needful. Is it that they pay her or find a way to get the jewelry back. But this is a very funny one.
What? You say they should pay her 1 billion.
So what would they do? They would have to pay her or find a way to buy the jewelry and give it to her. And the sad part of the story is that they've been charging her. There's a service charge that has been paid.
They've been charging her for taking care of her invincible jewelry. More details on page more details on page 6 of the Nation newspaper. Moving on now, above the masthead of the Nation, we also have here Dangote Refinery for inauguration on May 22nd, and that is on page 5. So what we have is that the president, Muhammadu Buhari, will inaugurate the Dangote Refinery on May 22nd. And this is coming from Special Assistant to the President on Digital Communications, Bashir Ahmed. So, efforts by the federal government to make Nigeria self-sufficient in local refining of crude oil and save the scarce foreign exchange used in importation of petroleum products have received a boost. The 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery, the world's largest single-train refinery, is set for inauguration on May 22nd by President Muhammad Buhari. So much high hopes, so much expectations from this Dangote refinery. Fuhad, what are your thoughts?
Well, at least if the president could not revive any of our 4 refineries, at least at the point of leaving office, it will be commissioning a private refinery. So it's not all failure. You follow that report, because I don't know where the writer of that report is coming from.
It's Bashir Ahmed that tweeted that. What I just
okay, well, Bashir, because again, okay. So the writer of that report is just following Bashir Ahmed tweets that the effort of the government to ensure that we refine locally, get a boost, the self-sufficient. So the government was not able to fix any of our refineries, but they are going to commission a private man's refinery. It's a good one. It's a very good one, at least. We have to celebrate that. Luckily, I think we've been able to get 20% stake from that at $2.5 billion. I really don't want to, because again, Dangote is just a businessman doing his own thing. So it would be wrong for us to sit back here and continue to say, oh, whether I did well or not. It's just a businessman pushing his own business and doing well for himself. But I think we need to reflect on ourselves as a nation. How an individual is able to build this kind of things within 6 years and commission it. And as a country, we have not been able, to revive any of our refineries. I know a lot of people are going to come up with the excuse that the government should outsource business. That, the government has no business in business. But I always say the idea of Aramco, the Saudi oil firm, just like our own NNPC, that is currently regarded as the most viable company in the world. Sandra, it is run by the Saudi government. It is owned by the Saudi government. And Aramco has functional refineries in Saudi Arabia. Those are they ghosts and spirits, like Gabriela from Alaba would say? Are they not human beings like us? Because that's the reality now. Aramco, let people go and read the story of Aramco that is owned by Saudi Arabia.
All right.
It's owned by government and run by government, and it has functional refineries. And today it is even ahead of blue chip countries in the world. It is regarded as the most viable company in the world. It is a government-owned institution. And those are individuals, they're not ghosts and spirits. So why is our own different? I think the commissioning should be celebrated because it's a Nigerian doing well for himself. But it also calls for sober reflection.
Thank you very much. More details on page 5. And finally, from the Nation newspaper, we have here, Keyamo, petitions hearing can't end before May 29. So, as we all know, the Presidential Election Petition Court will begin its sitting in Abuja today with a pre-hearing session, and there are 5 petitions that are pending before the court. Now, Festus Keyamo, who happens to be Minister of State for Labor and Employment, has said that those calling for the determination of presidential election before May 29 are, and I'm quoting now, plainly ignorant or crassly mischievous. And he's arguing that for such to happen, an amendment to some sections of the Constitution and court rules must be undertaken. Far-fetched or just speaking facts, Fuad?
Well, I don't know whether it's about ignorance or it's about mischief. And I think, again, we need to appeal to Festus Kiamu SAN to please douse the tension, really, because, yes, there's always a tendency to want to go ballistic on people, to go, and all of that. But I think, again, in celebrating victory, one has to exercise some level of decorum. And I think we can just appeal to the NLSP to apply some decorum in public utterances. Now, we've always said it, Sandra. Our constitution does not give room for the complete determination of petitions before inauguration. For us to have that, because Bishop Onelkon said it recently, some group of Igbo leaders also talked about the fact that, look, the inauguration should not hold until all petitions are concluded. But those are just opinions. It's not anything constitutional. As it is, what the Constitution says, again, for sake of proper education of people who don't know, is that, look, after the conduct of elections and results are announced, the satisfied parties have 21 days to file their petition. After the 21 days, the tribunal have 180 days to determine the cases. The 180 days, that's about 6 months. 6 months to determine the cases. And then after, if, for example, let us take the presidential election, we start at the appeal court. So as it is, within 180 days now, all of those issues must be resolved. After which, there's an opportunity for the Supreme Court, if an appeal is made in the Supreme Court, and that should take 60 days. So if you add 6 months plus another 2 months, we are talking of how many months? 8 months for all of the cases to be determined. That is the presidential election. The same thing applies to the governorship election. Unfortunately, the governorship election has 3 levels. The governorship election at the tribunal level, which starts at the state tribunal, must be concluded within 180 days. It goes to the appeal court if an appeal is made for another 60 days. Then from there to the Supreme Court for another 60 days. So we are talking of 10 months. And for assembly elections, whether state or federal, it is 2 levels. From the state tribunal for 180 days and the appeal court where it ends for another 60 days. Well, those are the provisions of the Constitution as it stands, Sandra. If we are going to have an amendment, it cannot be now. It would have to be when we have inaugurated the 10th Assembly, and then we amend our Constitution to accommodate a situation where petitions are decided on before inauguration. So everybody talking about, don't inaugurate, don't swear in until cases are concluded, are just giving their own opinion. There's nothing constitutional about it. And I will just permit me. Again, we need to ask ourselves, this recommendation, all of these things we are talking about, have been recommended by the Justice Ways Commission since 2008, Sandra. All of the people complaining now that we should not have inauguration or swearing in, were they not privy to the 2008 Justice Ways Commission report that suggested these things that they are now raising? After the report was done in 2008, Sandra, Goodluck Jonathan, the then president, set up a committee that reviewed all of the suggestions of the Ways Committee and adopted it, but they did not implement it. Goodluck Jonathan failed to implement that commission's report. President Muhammadu Buhari also, when he came in 2015, also set up a committee to review the Ways report, and they also adopted it and recommended for its implementation. President Muhammadu Buhari for 8 years did not implement that commission's report. That gave good recommendations on electoral reform, how we are supposed to conduct our elections, independence of INEC, how to dispense with of petitions before inauguration takes place. We net all of those things. Politicians benefited from the lacuna and what we have, and everybody is complaining now. So until we amend our constitution, Sandra, there's nothing that can be done. It is still what it is.
Thank you so much, Fuhad. That was quite, extensive. Appreciate, but then we can get more details as regards, the petitions, the 5 different petitions that's before the PEPC as they begin pre-hearing today. The details on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. Now, let's quickly move on to the Punch newspaper. I think at some point, Fuhad, we may have to, properly, maybe Okweyemi or maybe the political roundtable may have to properly dissect, the Uwe's report. People need, people need to, get more information as what exactly that report, proposes or suggests. All right, let's move on to the Punch newspaper. You're listening to Mainland 98.3 FM. This is Trends in the Papers. And now the major trending stories that we're taking from the Punch. Asset declaration. CCB tells Tinubu and others to submit their forms before May 29. And then we have riders to that. Asset declaration ongoing in 36 states. No swearing in without form submission, says CCB. Bureau says defaulters risk removal from office. 40 Ogun politicians obtain forms. So, the Code of Conduct Bureau has said that the president-elect, the vice president-elect, and 28 incoming governors must declare their assets before May 29. Other officials, including senators-elect and reps-elect, are expected to declare their own before June 5, when they will be sworn in. And the CCB spokesperson, Mrs. Veronica Kato, said that assets declaration was an integral part of the swearing-in ceremony according to law. And the CCB spokesperson has also warned that any defaulting officials would not be sworn in, stressing that asset declaration was a part of the inauguration process. How important is asset declaration to, the performance or the, yes, let me say performance or inauguration, or to who, these officials will be when they get into office? How important is asset declaration?
Yeah, very important, because it's about probity for our public officials. And because what it does is that, look, as you are coming into government, you declare your assets. This is what I have. I have 10 houses. I have 2 cars. I have a minus wife. You don't declare that one. But you can declare, what are the assets you have, really? Basically, your assets, you have a landed property, so it is well declared. So when you are leaving again, you do a counter declaration. So it is checked. Because it is expected that as a public official, we need to check that while you are coming into government, this is what you had. As you were leaving, this is what you had. So it will be checked against your income. That you were a governor, this is what you were being paid. How come that when you were coming in as a governor, you said you had 10 houses, but now you have 500 houses in your name? So it is the sake of probity for our public, for our elected public officials. So that's why it is very, very important. And I think a lot of them are already picking the form, and they will do the needful, because those are constitutional requirements for them to declare their assets. Again, declaration of assets is one thing. I think a lot of our politicians have a way of circumventing the process. Yes, they will declare this asset, but we've seen people buying properties using names of proxies, business associates, family members that are not even, and we've seen people also run offshore accounts in safe haven countries where they hide some of these assets. And so, yes, they can declare all of the assets which are constitutional requirements, but it will not really deter people who are fraudulent, because they have ways of doing some of these things. So it's just for sake of public probity for elected officials.
Well, more details on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. Asset declaration by the Code of Conduct Bureau. Now let's move on to Vanguard. We have just a minute or two left on the show, so we'll just rush through Vanguard stories, the one we haven't picked from the other papers. However, the major headline on the front page of Vanguard, 10th National Assembly will exploit confusion in APC to produce speaker, says opposition parties. Okay. To seat Senate President in Southeast, Senate caucus taxed Tinubu and APC. Labour Party 35-member caucus weighs option to vote on block. Wase Betara Jaji Soli pull 287-member alliance. Baja Faleke disagree over alleged misinformation. Gadi intensifies battle, unveils agenda for reps. However, this is interesting, Fuad. Just in 30 seconds or less, we exploit confusion in APC to produce speaker. What do you make of that statement coming from opposition parties?
It's a fantastic one. That's the beauty of opposition politics. if the ruling party is not able to get its house in order, yes, it creates an opportunity for the opposition to do what they need to do. Basically, they may not even be the ones producing the speaker, but they would align with the speaker that will give them some good, it's going to be a deal. They just strike a deal. We saw it in 2015. And that's why we're saying that the ruling APC has to be careful. And like I predicted, I think it was on Thursday we said, that I doubt if the APC would come out with an official statement on endorsement or consensus. They're going to have to leave it open, but in doing that, they still have to be very careful. The opposition have a number that can give them a bloody nose.
All right. Thank you very much, Fuhad. That's a wrap for Trends in the Papers this morning. Thank you very much for staying with us. However, don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. We'll be back by 8:40 for Mainland Focus, where we'll be putting some spotlight on two major trending stories, two or three major trending stories from the Trends in the Papers this morning. My name is Omobola Sandra. This is Mainland 98.3 FM, and Fuhad Saheed is our analyst joining in via the phone line. And we'll be right back.
And 98.3 FM, your number one radio, reaching stars, the sound of Lagos.
For this Naija wey we dey so, say you no hold cash no mean say wahala dey o. You wan send money to Male for Villa, just use Momo. You wan buy recharge card or data, just use Momo. You wan pay for market wey you buy, just use Momo. You fit use Momo run plenty